From Walt Disney Pictures, Cool Runnings, the #1 comedy in America, is #1 with critics. Joel Siegel raves, "This is Rocky on Ice. It goes for the gold and gets it." Respect. Cool Runnings is an action-packed comedic gem and terrifically exhilarating.
I can't get my helmet on.
Don't miss the gotta love it movie of the season. It's 5 stars and a howlingly funny 10. For Cool Runnings, rated PG.
Finally, we're going to discuss the true origin story of ReconCinemation. Welcome back to a brand new episode of ReconCinemation. I'm your host, John Diner.
I'm David Munchak.
I'm Brent Hutchins.
And this is the podcast that takes a look back at some of our favorite films from the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And we're checking out how they hold up here today. And today is a very interesting one. We covered romance. We did a little sports romance this month. And now we're going to hit that Olympic fever because we're going to look at the 1993 classic Cool Runnings.
Hey.
All right. We're finally getting to it. I know it's been on our list for a long... Oh, wait. Maybe we just threw it on. But hey, let's do it.
Maybe it just popped on there.
Well, we had a lot of choices out there, but we decided to keep it light, I guess.
So many to choose from. But yeah, we went on the lighter fare this time. So we're looking at Cool Runnings. So before we get to it, David, I think it's your turn. Let's do our 6 degrees of ReconCinemation.
Cool. So yeah, let's connect our current movie Cool Runnings to something else using the old Kevin Bacon kind of barometer to get close. So can you guys connect for me a movie also released in 1993? Cool Runnings to Robin Hood Men in Tights. Probably pretty easy. But that's one of my that's one of my 93 faves that doesn't feature dinosaurs. So
Okay.
There's so many. There's like 40
so many
movies that have dinosaurs in 93.
Big dinosaur movie. Big dinosaur year.
Yeah. A little bit. Okay, cool. So we'll come back by the end of the episode and Brent and I will both find a path from Cool Runnings to Robin Hood Men in Tights in as few moves as possible.
Good luck.
All right, Brent.
Yeah,
Brent.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Gonna need it. I've never seen Men in Tights.
Oh, you should. It's delightful.
I might have to research who's even in it. It's Carrie Elways is in that, right?
Carrie Elways is Robin Hood.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Start with that.
There's a bevy of stars in that one. You'll see.
Yeah, it was kind of a... All right, never mind. We'll get it. We'll get there.
You got this, Brent. You got it.
I'm feeling a little nervous about it, but I think I can figure it out.
There are consequences if you can't.
I think you know what? I think I've already got it, but I'm going to hold on to that thought till the end of the episode. So
they're making me feel like I'm not necessary.
You'll get it. It's going to come to you, and you're going to be like, "Oh, that was easy."
I hope.
Okay, so Brent, give us a rundown. What's happening in Cool Runnings?
Sure. Cool Runnings, the 1993 sports comedy masterpiece directed by John Turteltaub and penned by the dynamic duo of Lynn Seifert and Tommy Swerdlow, is a cinematic roller coaster of laughs and triumphs. Picture this, guys. A bunch of Jamaican sprinters, disqualified from the Summer Olympics, decide to take on the Winter Olympics with a bobsled team. Led by the determined coach Irv Blitzer, played by the legendary John Candy, this unlikely crew faces more frosty challenges than a snowman in a sauna. From mastering the art of bobsledding in the tropics to enduring icy stares from skeptical competitors, our Jamaican heroes bring the heat to the chilly world of the Winter Olympics. It's a hilarious and heartwarming tale of friendship, determination, and the sheer audacity of dreaming beyond palm trees and beaches.
Okay, David, bring us back in time. Let's rewind to October 1993. What's happening in the world?
Oh wow, October 1st, 1993. What a time. We're in the newly christened magical Bill Clinton era presidency this year in the US, and Mariah is in the middle of her reign at #1 on the Billboard charts with Dream Lover. She spent, I think, 7 or 8 weeks there with Meatloaf ready to take over next month with "I'd Do Anything for Love." CD sales were continuing to surge with these popular tunes hitting the airwaves as cassette tapes continue to decline. Huge television debuts, forever altering the pop culture landscape, occurred already. Just as people are walking to the theater to see Cool Runnings on opening day, they would have already witnessed the first episodes of The X-Files, Bill Nye the Science Guy, The Ricky Lake Show, Boy Meets World, Walker, Texas Ranger, and the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers.
And that Ricky Lake show sure had legs.
It sure did. I was a big fan of the Ricky Lake Show that back then, and I watched for years. The MLB had playoff fever that would ultimately lead to the Toronto Blue Jays taking on the Philadelphia Phillies, and the Blue Jays won. So sorry, Phils. Dazed and Confused continue its indie run in theaters, which we've also covered on the show. And you could also have seen Elijah Wood and Mac in The Good Son, Macaulay Culkin, but we were all calling him Mac back then. But of course you could also see the James Caan, Holly Berry, Omar Epps, Christy Swanson romp, The Program, from Walt Disney Pictures.
Would you call that a romp?
I think it's a romp. I've never seen it.
I
think it's a pretty heavy
romp.
It's pretty heavy drama, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of what was going on, just sort of in a pop culturally relevant way. As far as the globe, I don't know. I'm sure
That's good. You're good.
Terrible things were happening in 93.
In 93, there was nothing happening outside the United States.
Especially
time
outside
froze. It was only things happened within the United States borders.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah. What a time to be alive. My God, that music, those CDs coming in, Walker, Texas Ranger being gifted to the world. It might be God's greatest gift to humankind.
I think it absolutely adds to the legend of Chuck Norris.
Well,
I don't think we would have the Chuck Norris jokes today if Walker, Texas Ranger didn't exist.
Yeah,
I highly recommend Walker for anyone who has not watched it, and I'm not talking about the new Walker.
I was going to say, what about the new Walker?
Forget that. That's
Papadopoulos, or whatever that actor's name is.
Yeah,
Jared Padalecki.
That's the one.
Padalecki.
Yeah, he knows what he's doing.
Go back to the original Walker, because every episode just has a there's so many wonderful things that happen that is pure joy and hilarious action and music cues and Chuck just being Chuck. And great dialogue. Really, it's a gem. Highly recommend if you're looking for a great time.
Does he have any scenes with Christy Brinkley working out on that slide table thing that they used to sell late at night? Do you remember that?
I feel like that got worked in somewhere along the way.
I'm pretty sure that was the beginning of Pilates.
Yeah. Chuck leads the way.
Always.
All right. So Cool Runnings. When was the first time you guys saw this? Brent, let's start with you.
I have no idea. It was not in the theater. It was certainly on VHS, maybe DVD. Likely when I was working for Video Impact, the old video store in Sugar Land, Texas. And I just remember it being like kind of coming out of nowhere. I mean, of course, in 93, it was not in my wheelhouse to be like super jazzed about like family movies, as a young teen, angsty grunge rocker, Metallica listener, like kind of in between banging my head and wearing plaid. And so I probably would have scoffed at this at first, but then it kind of was a thing when it came out. And John Candy being John Candy and him always being kind of great, I think I eventually came around when I worked at the video store and I watched it. And I remember actually enjoying it quite a bit, like thinking it was really funny and heartwarming, and I was surprised by it. But I think that's probably the only time I saw it until rewatching it just this week for the podcast.
Yeah, that's I hear you there. I have very similar recollections of it. But David, what about you? First time watch, or had you seen this one?
No, I avoided this one. I don't like the Olympics. I don't like Jamaica.
Jamaicans.
I don't like movies. This was a hat trick. So no, I just avoided this one. Didn't really appeal to me at all. Like, I don't know. It just wasn't something I was gonna line up for. And then once it hit video, that was it. That was gonna stay in the dustbin for me. So this was a treat to see a new John Candy movie. So that was my big draw to watch it this time. Aside from the it's mandatory to do the show, of course. But no,
contractually obligated.
Yeah, it's in the bylaws.
Yeah, I think all three of us have pretty much the same kind of experience with this movie. That remember it coming out, but we were all at an age where this was not a movie that was going to be in our sort of wheelhouse at the moment. That we were, teenagers at the time. So the Disney family film was not something that was going to be attractive to us. Me personally, this was a weird phase where I was really not watching movies at all. I mean, I saw Jurassic Park and I saw a couple other things in the theaters, but I was not really loving movies at this time. Very brief moment in time, but it was all sports and, baseball, basketball, wrestling, football, all that. So this one really kind of, I was aware of it when I worked at Suncoast, the nice big clamshell box on the rack was, a regular seller, but still had really no interest in it until recently. It kind of came up again, and when we were batting around ideas, the idea of this one came up, and I was like, well, we really haven't seen it, so now why not get into it now and see how it holds up? And I had some suspicions going in, but like you mentioned, David, the John Candy side of it is it's a whole thing with this movie that, we've obviously lost John Candy in 94, and there's not that many John Candy films out there that we haven't experienced. So it was kind of cool to see a piece of him that we haven't seen before.
Yeah.
And we'll kind of deep dive into John Candy here shortly. But, actually where it came up was on our While You Were Sleeping episode, which was also directed by John Turteltaub, was, I think, where this one first started to cross my brain of other films that he had done that were popular and that we hadn't kind of looked at. So that's where it came from. But it's interesting. There's a lot of big fans of this movie. Whether it's John Candy fans or people that had seen it as kids that remember loving this movie. And
yeah, I think it's got to be a nostalgia based thing that, I wonder how many of those people have also rewatched it recently.
That's what I was about to say, that I don't know how many. It doesn't feel like a movie that's kind of out there and present again and been, sought after on a nostalgia level. It's just something that you saw as a kid, you loved it, and you've never watched it for the most part, and watched it again. So I would be very curious to see what those people thought of it, watching it now.
Yeah, it's that thing of like, oh, did you, as an adult, did you love that movie because it's good or because you saw it when you were 8? Like, that's
right.
That's the big major question.
Yeah, that holds true. That holds true for a lot of movies, like the original Star Wars trilogy included. That, if we had seen those original, our generation tends to love the original trilogy more than all the other movies, right?
Yeah,
but had we seen that at a different age, or had we seen those movies now for the first time, would we love those as much? I don't know. You can't really answer that.
I can. I can answer.
Empire Strikes Back, yes, for sure.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
But there's a ton of movies in that, that in that category that like your experience with film in general, and that's part of what we embrace here on the show is your memories of watching a movie for the first time. It's not usually, a lot of times it's not just the movie, it's the memory of the experience. You're with your friends, you're at a certain time in your life, you're with your family, you're with whatever, an uncle that you lost or something, and that was, you connected over that movie. So sometimes positive memories of films aren't actually about the movie itself, they're about the experience of watching that movie. So this one for us doesn't fall into any of those categories because it's basically a first-time view.
Yeah, pretty sure I watched it by myself the first time I saw it. No lost uncle, but I don't know. I do remember liking it though. Like when I saw it, I was surprised by it. I thought it was funny.
Well, it's on the surface. I mean, there's kind of two ways to look at this movie. There's the surface level, which is a fun, lighthearted movie with John Candy, who we all love, and with the underdog story. So it's hard not to. That formula is so easy to root for your characters. Underneath that, looking at it now, there's a whole kind of other perspective that you wouldn't see as a kid, and we wouldn't have really acknowledged it back in 1993, but now we can kind of see it for cultural appropriation and a lot of things. Like really watching it, like so much jumped out at me that was like cringe.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Before we kind of dive down that road, though, let's kind of go back a little bit and look at the development of this movie. It was very loosely based on the true story of the 1988 Jamaican Olympic bobsled team. That was, if you start to dig into the real story, I mean, there's some similarities, but there's also very, very different, much darker side to the what happened with that team and why the team was created and how it all kind of came together. So there was a lot of fictionalizing going on here.
Were they even Jamaican?
They were Jamaican.
Okay.
In real life, they were actually Jamaican.
The movie got it half right then.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, but the story, the general idea is the underdog story, which is, like we said, always very attractive to audiences. That that Rocky kind of reaching for greatness is always something that audiences are generally attracted to. The original script was called, I think it's pronounced Blue Maga. And it started in 1989. It was developed for Jeremiah Chechik, who we know as the director from National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. The original version was much darker. It was not the Disney film that this grew into. It was a lot more. It featured a lot more drug use. It featured a lot more the dark side of these characters, and there was more racism. There was a lot more sex. There was a lot more sexual interactions in the film. So this was far from what we saw.
Well, and Disney wasn't even involved with it at the beginning, right? Like,
right.
This is before came in and Disneyfied it,
and boy, did that
lost all that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a whole that version of this movie. I mean, you have to be very careful about it, but it would be very interesting to see the true life story and what these guys, this team really went through, and grounding in more reality than the fluff Disney version that was presented later on.
Yeah, the Canadian honky tonk version given to us by Disney.
Right.
Oh, that's right.
But it took years. So it started in 1989. Jeremiah Chechik's involved. Eventually, he leaves the project for Benny and June, which is, Brent, a movie I believe you've put on the list. And
Yeah, it keeps getting. I don't know. It keeps getting deleted. I don't. I've had to add it several times, but it will be done someday. I'll sneak it in there, John.
All right, Benny and June coming soon. But so he departs. They bring in Brian Gibson to next as director, who continues to work through the script all the way until I believe probably I think it's late 91 or early 92, and then he ends up leaving the project to do What's Love Got to Do with It. So, they're going through directors here, and this is kind of stretching on, which is always a recipe for kind of disaster.
Oh, I thought you were going to say success.
See our Halloween 6 episode if you want to talk about years on a project and cycling through directors. Oh, by the way, you can listen to that in the archives at ReconCinemation.com. Eventually they bring in John Turteltaub, and this is at this point Disney has stepped in and kind of taken the reins to the project and really started to reshape it to more of a family film. How do we make these characters lighter? Let's get the dark elements, the drugs, the sex. Let's kind of get rid of those entirely and, make this more of a family uplifting kind of film. So they bring in a director who had just done Three Ninjas. David, one of your top 3 films?
I was trying to remember if I've seen Three Ninjas. I've seen Surf Ninjas. I haven't seen Three Ninjas.
Beverly Hills Ninja. That's the one with Chris Farley, right?
It is.
Yeah.
I remember I rented that after he died, and I don't remember a fucking frame of that movie.
It's not as fine.
I remember the box with him doing like the
split
kick. Kick.
Split. Yeah.
That's all I remember.
My Ninja World stopped at American Ninja, so that was
it's probably a good time to get out.
Yeah,
people were the 90s were pretty fucked up with ninja craze, like the ninja craze. Like
they love ninjas in the 90s.
Like after the
starts
Ninja
in the
Turtles,
80s,
like,
but gets all silly in the 90s.
Yeah, it's like let's get like everything's ninjas. Like and then like when the internet happened, it was ninjas and zombies. I think were like the biggest like internet like thing. Like everything's got to have ninjas in it, and everything's a zombie. It's really weird. Like I kind of hated the internet in the late 90s, early 2000s.
Do you guys remember an 80s franchise of ninja movies with like Lee Van Cleef is like the head ninja? Am I making that up? I feel
no, you're not. I totally am blanking on the name of it right now. But
I used to love that movie because it was like all the ninja stereotypes where he's like got smoke bombs and he's using the ninja stars and all sorts of stuff. I was like, oh, this is what ninjas are about. Totally. So into it as a kid.
What's funny though is that the amount of incompetence that they showed in the like 99% of the ninjas were pretty awful.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. It was just the like stars that were amazing. Everyone else was. It's like the stormtroopers. Just send an army of them to get destroyed.
Yeah.
Yeah. But there's one really good one. But yeah, Three Ninjas was a big kids film, and that was really kind of put John Turteltaub on the map. And Disney scooped him up and put him on this film. And as we talked about on our While You Were Sleeping episode, check it out in the archives at ReconCinemation.com. A lot of his movies they're light, they're fluffy, they are a certain kind of formula based films. And I felt like on While You Were Sleeping I really embraced that. And I was really okay with it for that film. For this one I wasn't as okay with it, but I understand that those formulaic films have their place, right? Like not everyone wants to a deep kind of head twist on every kind of movie that feels like so much of modern films right now is twist after twist after twist, and it's got to keep hooking you every, with streaming, they've got to keep hooking you every, 10 minutes or so, or you're going to lose interest in the movie and just move on.
Mm-hmm.
Back then was not really the case. It was, you were in for the ride for this story. There really was no internet distracting you. So, I think there's something to be said for formula films still having a place and letting people, not being so hard on people for appreciating those kind of movies that like, some families, they're not going to sit through a Christopher Nolan film,
Right.
Like, they're going to want these where they can just kind of sit down, watch, enjoy, go on the ride for the film, and that's it.
Yeah, it's a cute little film with, and it's got something. It's definitely for the family because it's pretty disposable, right? You don't have to come back to this. It's got like it's a lot of cartoonish behavior, a lot of physical humor and silliness, and then and some okay jokes and stuff. Like, and it's really, if on the surface level, it's very vanilla, but there is some charm with each of the actors that kind of elevated a little. But it's it's like if you're not paying attention, it's surface level and almost inoffensive, and if you don't know what you're looking at, like,
right.
I don't know anything about Jamaicans, right? Like, and then as a kid, they'd be like, haha, like I wouldn't. It's just like leaning into all the stereotypes and things that like you wouldn't know that it's kind of like, no, this is not doing Jamaica any service. This isn't doing, like, this is not a good film to be representative. But like surface level, fun, silly movie that, and it doesn't lean too heavily out of the fish out of water stuff. Like, that's just part of it. Like the big joke is, ha ha ha, they're from a warm climate. This is great, and that just keeps recurring. But it's not done too harshly. I think like I don't know. It doesn't play. To me, it doesn't play it up too much. But
yeah, I mean, the intention behind it is certainly not to shed these guys in a negative light, right? It's very like on the surface, it's just, it is a bit of a fish out of water, but that's the obvious joke, right? That's just taking these guys, like you said, from the hot climate, the warm climate, to guys who have never even seen snow before suddenly have to they're Olympian bobsledders. So
I was going to say, and you guys both touched on it, like the thing that makes it kind of cringy now, was not really a thing in 93, where there's this like blanket offensiveness of stereotyping, right? Like, I think the stereotyping of the Jamaicans and stuff in retrospect is by today's standards, the thing that kind of makes this feel a little out of place. But but in 93, like, there were certain stereotypes you weren't supposed to touch on, but it wasn't all stereotypes yet. There was still some leeway in when you could stereotype and who you could stereotype.
Yeah.
There's leeway.
Yeah, I mean, it was 93
really, there was
there. No, 100%.
Yeah. I mean, it didn't really start to becoming more of a conscious thing until for another probably 10 years or so before it really even started its kind of journey of political correctness and trying to, be more realistic and walk away from the stereotypes. But this, we'll get into it now, that the damage like that this movie caused in the long run, there's a lot of Jamaicans who have a big problem with this movie. It's kind of this split thing because it certainly shed a light on Jamaica, right, as a country, as people, that a lot of areas that don't get a lot of film, that don't have a big film community, really embrace any movie to come there and just show the landscape and show the environment and show the people and hire the crew and get these people involved in the film industry. I would go to these film conferences where there's people from all over the place who are just desperate for a film community to start being built there. So there's an appreciation of that, and just like show Jamaica on a big scale. That's cool. but then the fallout from it is the creation, maybe not the first iteration of it, but the real cementing of those stereotypes of the reggae and the hair and the accents and the silly characters that,
hey man, like all
yeah,
that.
exactly. Like that over the long haul, there's a lot of Jamaicans who have a big problem with this film that
Yeah.
everyone assumed that that's what everyone's like. It's this, it's almost like creating exactly what they were. They're these Disney versions of characters that aren't real people.
Yeah. Well, that's like, that's easy. What that's you need shortcuts, right, to create and like creating a whole identity out of just being Jamaican. Like that's not good enough. Like you can, like, hey, we're from Jamaica and we are Jamaicans and we're gonna do things to Jamaican way. But like, what does that mean? Like what? And then it comes down to a more or less a catchphrase. And it's, again, for the uninitiated that you don't know what you're looking at, like it's cute and it's easy, it's accessible, and then you don't really have to think about it anymore. So it's, but yeah, you're right. Long term, for what it represents, for if that's someone's exposure to Jamaica, especially as a child, like if that's their only exposure, and then you grow up thinking like this is what Jamaica's like and Jamaican people are like.
Yeah, to that point, I think most of the youth in America's exposure to Jamaica was, Sebastian the Crab from Little Mermaid. Like that was it. So they're like, oh, these guys sound like Sebastian the Crab, and that's all. That's as far as it went.
Which was kind of the mandate from I mean, it's out there from Jeffrey Katzenberg, who is high up at Disney at the time. That was Jeff. What they wanted. They wanted a bunch of Sebastians, on the team, and they sound exactly like that. And I don't actually put a lot of fault on John Turteltaub for this, because there's been, like, this year or 2023, they had a reunion, a cast, and Turteltaub, had a reunion at some convention, I think. And
it was the 30-year anniversary, right?
Right. It was 30-year anniversary, and they all seemed, good with each other. And we're all talking about how the accent was a big point of contention, that, how the thickness of it, the needing to be able to make sure people could literally understand what they were saying. It was a lot of back and forth with the studio over that, on top of all the other stereotypes. But that was the one that they really battled over. But I don't, from John Turteltaub's point of view, it's his second movie. Really, it's his first big movie, that a big studio film. And how hard is he willing to fight at that point in his career? It's if he stood his ground, he was just going to get fired and replaced. Same thing with the actors, to a certain degree, that if they were going to make it a thing, nobody was at that point in their career. And I think only John Turteltaub would probably go on to a point where they could fight with a studio and hold their ground and not sweat so much, of being replaced. And Turteltaub would go on to have a long relationship with Disney, with the, going all the way through the National Treasure films. So
yep, the Kid, National Treasures, a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, but they tried, and I think at the expense of all of them getting replaced, they eventually just kind of gave Disney the version that they wanted.
Yeah, throw on the most popular Bob Marley song, and right, and just have that sort of that undertone of that reggae music, and and like, don't worry, like, just chill out, it's Jamaica, everybody's just, we take it easy. And like, I found I would love, like, the fictional, these four fictional characters, I'd love a little more on each of their backstories. Like, I want like 15 minutes on every one of them and then you could really provide a contrast of how do these four different men in Jamaica live, because they all live very different lives and they all have their own motivations, but you really only get like a piece. So like, it's not a big character movie in a lot of ways.
Yeah, the only one you get is like Junior's kind of backstory. You know, there's the struggle that he has with his father, right? Like
Right.
but that's as deep as it gets. Like that's the depth of it all.
Yeah.
And I don't really feel like we get anything like that from any of the others. It's just that one character. He's not.
No,
even
you don't. Yeah, you don't. I think you get a little bit with Leon's character, Doris, just a little bit, but and then the other guys, it's the names like Yul Brynner and Sanka Coffee, like that. I mean, just the names. It's like, oh, haha, that's funny. But like,
Right.
So are you saying all Jamaican people just they find American things funny, so they name their children after that? Like,
I did that. I wasn't sure what to make of that. Like when we're like that. Wait, these are their names? Like their actual names, or is it they're definitely their? It's just the nicknames they go by forever.
we don't really know. I mean, Yul Brynner. Okay, the joke is that he's bald, right? Like Yul Brynner was bald, but was he bald as a kid? Was that I don't know. That's you really. The point being that you don't get the enough of these characters to show them as real people. It's very easy. John Candy's character, Irv Blitzer, as the coach, like you get a backstory with him. You get emotional motivation. He's the only character that you really get a sense of depth with. But the rest of these guys, you don't. It's just, it's handed to you and you're moving on.
Yeah. That's but yeah, so like that, and I'll give credit to all the actors that they do, like the moments of drama between them and their camaraderie and friendship. I think they're really effective. Like I don't think they're half-assing it. I think they're genuinely trying to put in like really great performances to like make sure these characters remain likable. And I'm sure the best intention of like, if we have to play Jamaicans, and half of them were Jamaican, but like if we have to be like, let's do this as real. Let's let these characters have moments of like realism to shine. Like we're not cartoons. These characters aren't cartoons 100% of the movie, which is pretty nice. But
yeah,
it's the best you could manage.
Sanka kind of is. Dougie Doug is kind of a cartoon the whole time.
Yeah,
I would feel like, but I think that's obviously on purpose. Like
that's his role.
100% for comedy relief.
Yeah,
right. That's his role in the dynamic of the foursome or the fivesome.
Yeah, true. He got one scene, but that's it.
Yeah, where he kind of stands up, and it's actually the one scene where, well, if we're talking about the same scene, it's the one moment where like he actually stands up for like being Jamaican. It's actually said kind of out loud that, don't worry about the Swiss or the Germans or whatever. Like, be Jamaican and be yourself, and which is something that they're really not doing, but
right.
It's kind of called out there. But I mean, that's his role in the dynamic of that group. That I do think that they have. I agree. I think they have a good energy with each other for what the characters are trying to play. It's not the performances are certainly there. It's not for lack of their effort in creating these characters. I think they are likable, but it's that, again, it's that two sides of the street that you if you dig a little bit, you start to like dislike the entire package, or you just accept it.
And I think John Candy is perfect to join that group, like to be with them, because he gets to play sort of the wise, he's the wise character as the coach. What I was like kind of hoping for was that because his character lives in Jamaica, there would be like some level of understanding of like, oh, this guy who's now in Jamaican culture, and it's not really that. He's just a bobsled coach. He has his history. He's separate from Jamaica, but I'm like, he's been living there. Like, that's interesting. Like this white Canadian dude or this American dude, whatever, like living in Jamaica, like, and we understand why later, but it's just sort of like, oh, he's and they don't play up this like difference between like this white American character versus these Jamaican characters and how they don't understand each other. Like they're just people in it, which is great. Like I like that, because they save that different stuff for like when you have the racist Germans.
Yeah. Is it the
Well,
Germans or the Swiss or the Swedes? Is it Germans?
or yeah,
I
maybe
thought it
the
was
Swiss.
Swiss. I kept
Yeah.
getting confused if they were Swiss or German or.
I thought they were. Aren't they speaking German when they go eins, zwei, drei, drei?
Yeah,
But
maybe they
but
are
did
German. Yeah.
do the Swiss? Maybe the Swiss have the same numbers. But I guess, but it is a mask of them not even really being racist. It's just that you don't belong here. Jamaicans don't do bobsled. Like it's like
Right.
girls don't play bass guitar. Like,
Right.
So because like there's only mention of the fact that these Jamaicans are black. Like it was funny when John Candy said it in that scene. He's like, what's the big deal? What? It's a little strange. There's 4 black men in a bobsled or something. That's the joke, or I forget what he sort of said. But like, so it's not like they keep pointing out all these differences to make it like a huge contrast. I just like that John Candy's part of the group, I guess.
Yeah. They stay just on this side of keeping it about black and white culture, right? They really do keep it specific about, like, we're not talking about black people, but like the joke isn't black people in the white snow, right? We're surrounded by white athletes. It is specifically like Jamaicans. They keep honing in on that it is, they could have easily gotten that more clear by having other black actors just kind of amongst the other athletes, but they didn't, that wasn't a thing.
No, but outside of Jamaica, I don't think there's any other black people in the movie.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So they're hovering right over that line that you could kind of argue it either way, but I think a lot of Jamaican people feel like it is from the research I was seeing, that feel like it was specifically to them.
Mm-hmm.
So
it is kind of it others them, right? It's an othering of these Jamaicans. There's just this weird culture, or this strange culture we're not familiar with, and we're going to show them in a fun, lighthearted way, and so you can try to understand them a little bit. It's very making cartoons out of them. It's a fascinating look. It's very 90s. It's very, and they're trying to do it without being like racist or whatever, but they're just, that's what they did. That's what the studios did. They found things. It's like, it's like the mystical Chinese person, right? Like there's like leaning into stereotypes that work for American audiences, and we're just of the day. And this in the mid 90s, this is the bread and butter of like a family film. Like this is working. Let's find something unique and interesting.
Like Lee Van Cleef playing a ninja.
And then going along with that, with John Candy here, you have the white savior complex that again is sort of being flirted with, that without him, this white coach, they would never get there. They would never be, make it as far as they made it. I think the only
I don't even think it's flirting. I think it's outright, especially in the scene where he like confronts the Olympic committee, I mean, like he is very much the reason they're allowed. I mean, he's also the reason they're being disqualified, but he's the one that goes in and basically
fights for them.
Yeah.
Oh, forgive me. I didn't realize the 4 black guys in a bobsled could make you blush.
I think we've heard enough.
Come on, Kurt. What you're doing is wrong, and you know it. Now, if this is about you and me, then let's get it straight right now. All right, 16 years ago, I made the biggest mistake of my life. I cheated. I was stupid. I embarrassed myself, my family, my teammates, my country, and my coach. If it's revenge you want, take it. Go ahead. Disqualify me, banish me. Do whatever you want, but do it to me. It was me who let you down, Kurt. It wasn't my guys. They've done everything you've asked of them, and they did it with all of you laughing in their face. Hell, it doesn't matter if they come in first or 50th. Those guys have earned the right to represent their country. They've earned the right to march into that stadium and wave their nation's flag. That's the single greatest honor an athlete could ever have. That's what the Olympics are about. 16 years ago, I forgot that. Don't you go and do the same.
I think the only thing that keeps it just on this side of that is John Candy, is the audience's relationship with John Candy and their love for him as an actor that stops it just short of that, of crossing that line. That
Sure.
if it were anybody else, I don't know. They talked about, like, the Disney, of course, wanted our guy, Kurt Russell, for that role, which was, has his long history with Disney films, and he'd reappear in Miracle down the road. But I don't know, with Kurt in that role, I think you would have crossed that line. I think with Scott Glenn, who is another actor they wanted for that, first of all, I can't see Scott Glenn as that character, but you would have also crossed that line. But because Candy has that, excuse me, lighthearted relationship with, that goes, back almost 15 years at this point, that of maybe not all of his movies have done well. We'll talk about where he kind of was in his career, but I think people loved him. I don't think that ever really died.
And it's also, for the point of the story, it's also just as unbelievable that John Candy was an Olympic bobsled,
right?
Athlete, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
I could believe Kurt Russell and John Glenn. Who'd you say?
Scott
John
Glenn.
Scott Glenn.
Yeah.
We're going to the moon. But Scott Glenn and Kurt Russell, I could believe that they were at one point, on a bobsled team. The fact that John Candy was on a bobsled team is like its own punchline to a joke as well in there.
Yeah.
That'd be like me being on a bobsled team. Like, my rotund ass ain't getting in a bobsled ever at any point in my life, like it's just not happening. So I think that's part of the gag.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they showing his picture from, what was it, 1972, that 20 years, that's a big difference.
Yeah.
But yeah, and John, like, let's look at John Candy for a second. That, where is he in his career? That it seemed to me at this point in time, I was not watching John Candy movies anymore. That by after Home Alone, it seems like he wanted to do something different. That he was really trying to find his way. And you see that a lot with, comedians or comic actors throughout their career, that at a certain point, a lot of them just don't want to continue doing the light stuff, the comedies anymore. They want to stretch their legs as actors. Bill Murray went through it. Steve Martin went through it. John Belushi, had he lived, certainly would have gone through it. Dan Aykroyd has gone back and forth. It seems like Candy, when he appeared in JFK, and I think Only the Lonely and Delirious were not movies that it was trying to do something different. And
but Delirious is still a comedy, right? Like,
Delirious is still a comedy, yeah. But it's also like they're clicking less and less.
Yeah, but I feel like, just looking at the stuff, I haven't seen Only the Lonely, so I don't know about that one, so I can't speak to it. But
it's
JFK,
kind of bizarre, that one.
JFK is the only thing that I see that really is like a true departure from what Candy's kind of done in the past. Like, I get what you're saying, because like all actors, I feel like every comedian goes through that progression, right? Like they get their, they make their name on comedy, and then they try to progress to kind of more meaningful dramatic roles. But I don't know, with Candy, it was just JFK, and I don't know.
I would argue that his character in this is fairly serious. He's not the comedy. He's the straight man here.
But it's comedy, like it's a comedy movie. You're right. His performance is more straight and dramatic. It requires more, of a straight play. But I still, like, other than JFK, everything that I see on his credits is comedy.
I think, though, I would argue that with that and Only the Lonely being a different kind of film, and his performance the way he approached his performance, and he had to fight to get this role, by the way, that they really did not want him.
Yeah, they wanted Kurt.
Yeah.
I'm sure they wanted Kurt first and foremost, right? Like
Right,
long-standing Disney, he is, like that. He's A-list at the time. I mean, John
Yeah.
Candy's A-list, but for different reasons. So
but really, like, Candy's star had started to fall. That as much as people still liked him, you had The Great Outdoors and Uncle Buck, which were huge movies. Following that up, you've got Who's Harry Crumb, which was a disaster, and Nothing But Trouble, which was, I think, Warner Brothers just letting Dan Aykroyd creatively run wild, which is something that probably should never be done. I mean, check the original concept for Ghostbusters and watch Nothing But Trouble.
Yeah. I don't know. Have you rewatched Nothing But Trouble?
I've seen it like 3 times.
Oh, gosh.
Life or recently?
I'm probably not within the last like 3 or 4 years, but fairly recently.
There's a whole like subculture of people that love that movie, which
That's a cult
it's another
movie, yeah.
it's another cult movie. I have not gone back to rewatch it, but I do recall when it came out, like I didn't get it. And it was like weird for all of the people involved in that. But so it was a miss. I think it hurt a lot of people's career.
It did.
Nothing but trouble.
It was at a point where everybody there, I mean, everybody involved in that movie needed to keep the train moving of hits. And that was a big
well, and they
sidetrack.
expected it to be a pretty big deal. I mean, they had, a bunch of name talent in there. I mean, you bring up Harry Crumb. I liked Harry Crumb as a kid. Like, it's goofy. It's whatever.
I did too. And I thought I would still like it. I wanted to cover it here for the show. And right, David, we went back and forth, and I watched it either last year or 2 years ago. And it's not good.
Yeah, I bet it doesn't hold up. But Uncle Buck came out that same year, and like I really like that movie. I think it's
Uncle
one of his
Buck
stronger ones.
Yeah, I think it's his last real hit film. Not to, separately from put Cool Runnings aside for a second.
Well, and Home Alone. I mean, Home Alone came
Home
later,
Alone's not a John Candy.
He's a small part.
Yeah, he's got. I mean, his role in Home Alone is great. Like, it's a great part of the film.
It's as much a John Candy movie as Die Hard is a Christmas movie. Let's put it that way.
Oh, you're going to confuse the audience.
Oh,
you're
boy,
confuse
David.
the audience with that.
Sorry.
But yeah, that's sort of, it feels like that's the end of the, successive hits is Uncle Buck. And then it's kind of a rocky road after that.
Yeah,
Home
it's bit parts, it's definitely winding down. Like, he's not the lead guy. I don't know that he was ever really a true lead guy, but
he was, I think, at his best when paired with someone, whether it's Eugene Levy or Dan Aykroyd in Great Outdoors, or
Tom Hanks and Splash
and Volunteers.
Yeah.
He needs to play off. He needs to play off someone as strong as him, really. Like, like he can't be the sole lead. Like, there's just something about it. Although because he just needs a good partner to work with, and then I think you have a hit. Like, but him to be the main character is kind of tough, because and I can see that's why you'd want to make that career transition to more dramatic roles or just something different rather than like just straight out and out comedy.
Imagine, I just like to imagine a future with John Candy in it. Wish we had that, but
yeah,
I would just, this is just a complete guess on my part, but when Tarantino got big, I could see Tarantino embracing a guy like John Candy and, him popping up in those movies and have, like Travolta, and Bruce Willis have entire second life to his career.
Well, he has that same like career arc, right? Where it's like he was kind of a popular for a thing, and then started to kind of, that popularity started to dwindle, and he got smaller parts, but was recognizable and lovable in the parts that he got. I mean, Rookie of the Year was, he was the announcer. He's great in that, like the bit parts that he got, he was good in. And yeah, I think someone like, maybe not Tarantino, but someone like a Tarantino, or at least during that movement that Tarantino started of bringing like those older popular actors back and putting them in lead roles and giving them that second kind of life in their career. He perfectly fits that sort of formula. And it would be great because, I mean, in retrospect, not having more Candy now, it's you miss him.
Yeah,
I miss
absolutely.
John Candy.
Yeah, I 100%. John Candy, Phil Hartman, like those are guys that there was so much ahead of them as they got into that next phase of their career. Could have been amazing.
Chris Farley's another one. I mean, the list is really long.
Yeah.
I mean, Robin Williams is one more recent. I guess not that recent. I'm old, but I mean, he had that, but I feel like there was more for him to give.
Robin had a long career, much longer than those guys, and had that success on both sides, dramatic and comedy. Yeah. That he had a bunch of wins on both sides of it. So, Belushi's another one too, but famous case of it. So I don't know. I think John Candy showed that he could do it. I think he showed here that he could nail those dramatic moments, and especially going back to another film we covered you can check it out in the archives, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. Looking back at that movie now, I think that movie's stock has risen so much more over time, as maybe John Hughes's best film, really, over the teen stuff that ages so poorly. Yeah, and a lot of that's
aged
Candy.
The best for sure.
Yeah, and but it's that his turn at the end of that film, and when things you come together and you realize what's really going on with that character, that's such a gut-wrenching moment, and your heart just aches for that guy, and that's not an easy performance.
No, not at all. I mean it shows that he has the chops to be dramatic. But I mean, that whole movie is pretty genius. I mean, just kind of the odd couple pairing of Steve Martin and John Candy, Yeah. I mean, you guys talked about it a bunch in the show, but yeah, it's that one's great.
Yeah, I almost want to go back and like do a 2.0 for Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, because I think my passion for that movie since we covered it has actually grown more and more. So if there's ever a movie we revisit that we've already covered, that one would be it. Plus, Brent, you weren't on that episode, so
I was not.
We can ReconCinemate.
Recon.
But so I don't know. I appreciate his performance here, but it does, like we were saying earlier, walk that line of the white savior complex. So I don't. What could you have done differently to make this more appropriate? And I think it's not that difficult. Is get some Jamaican people involved creatively in this film as advisors, as whatever, of okay, culturally, we would not do this. This is how this scene looks here.
Really dive into Jamaican culture. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Make that a true star of the movie,
Right. I mean, the first third of the movie is all shot in Jamaica.
Yeah, that was crazy. I didn't realize that it was only shot in Jamaica and Calgary. I was the Jamaican shots. I was like, where do they shoot this in California? What? But I mean, absolutely, they could dive further into that. I mean, that right there is the answer to how you do it.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like it's a bunch of white guys, and I know Don Steele was the producer, who's a kind of a legendary figure, but I don't know if she was as creatively involved, more as just keeping the ship moving and budgetarily. But they're a bunch of white people's views of what Jamaican culture is, which you're never going to get that right. So get some people involved, and I really do enjoy this cast. Especially, Dougie Doug really bounced off of this movie for springboarding the rest of his career, really. But
Man, he's
You
a
know,
goof.
yeah, and I would
I
say
actually
like
still liked him in this movie quite a bit. I was like, this
yeah.
character would typically annoy the hell out of me, but I was like, something about him in this,
Quite charming.
right? Like, I mean, just
yeah,
like it's
he's
totally rambunctious and full of energy, but very charming.
he's the heart of the group.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And he's also he and Raul D. Lewis were the only somewhat Jamaican people. You know, Dougie Doug is not fully Jamaican, but his father's Jamaican, so he had some experience culturally, and knew for sure like what was not accurate. But again, it was an uphill battle. Raul D. Lewis was hired as the dialect coach, and wasn't supposed to. He was there for the table read and was to help the actors. And I think at the last minute he kind of slid it. They just put him into that role. So, but Leon and Malik Yoba, not Jamaican at all. You know, really had to work on that accent. And Leon, I think at this point, I mean, he was in a bunch of stuff. Like he was coming off of All the Right Moves and Colors and The Five Heartbeats. He's in Cliffhanger, so a couple of those movies we have in the archives. But he's also in Madonna's Like a Prayer video.
Mm-hmm.
So I think for our age group, that's probably where the first place we would have caught him.
Yeah, there was always something familiar about Leon, but I didn't realize where I'd seen him. Yeah, I love his death scene in Cliffhanger too. Like, I think that not that he died, but I was like, it was a good fight between him and Sly. Like,
Yeah.
and I was like, oh, it was a really creative death.
Yeah.
But
I mean, he's a really good actor,
Absolutely.
and he showed a lot of range in all those varied kind of films. Malik Yoba, I think this is his first film, but he'd go on to some TV success with New York Undercover, and then we'd see him in Copland. I think, from what I heard, like he was real good buddies with Robert De Niro, and De Niro kind of got him onto things later on in his career. But they wanted Cuba Gooding Jr. They didn't want. I'm sorry. Cuba Gooding Jr., Eric LaSalle, Jeffrey Wright, all were considered for some of these roles and did not get it. It would have been interesting too, had any of them been cast. You know, how it would have fared out.
Jeffrey Wright is interesting because I don't know that I know much about Jeffrey Wright before Basquiat.
Me too.
Was he? I mean, I suppose he was around.
He was definitely around, but Basquiat's the movie that sort of put him on the map, and then
definitely
doing
at least my map. I was like, oh, This dude's great.
Yeah, Basquiat was where I first saw of him, and then he had such a great like indie career before he started doing bigger and bigger films, and obviously all the way to like the James Bond franchise, and I think American Fiction, his most recent film, was really interesting. So, but yeah, none of those actors were actually cast. Eric LaSalle would have been right before ER, so, which was probably a better move for him. I mean, his career launched really off of that.
Right. I could see Cuba in this. He seems Disney centric. I don't know if it's radio and things like that, but I think he could have worked. Yeah, he could have worked in this though, I think. What's controversial about? Yeah, I was going to say, what's controversial about Cuba?
His like, you know, inappropriateness with women, the alcohol abuse. Like he's been on trial for the last couple of years for a bunch of shit.
Oh damn! I have not seen the press on that.
His team is very good at keeping that shit out. No, I mean,
I mean that's why you haven't seen him in really anything since the American Crime Story, the OJ thing.
Wow.
That he's been like in a bunch of trouble.
Oh, cool.
Wow. Damn it.
Yeah.
So yeah, we keep going. Like obviously solid cast. It's it's this just very easily accessible, like vanilla kind of family movie that, like you said, it is damaging, and I can to the Jamaican sort of, to the country of Jamaica, I can see why and based on like what the research of like what people have been saying publicly about like what this movie sort of doesn't serve the interests of Jamaicans and Jamaican culture. It's like, and we can sit here and we always do this, like, oh, they, like I said earlier, like, oh, I'd love to see 15 more minutes of each of their backstories and stuff, but like, so like I don't know what is the better version of this movie, other than I would insist that you would need Jamaican creatives in charge of this versus, you know, whatever studio notes and whatever non-Jamaican writers might be involved. It's like, yeah, they should redo this movie, and they could even do it a family film, but just find that authenticity. Like, do the story of these guys again. And maybe I don't know, maybe the original team, maybe they're not necessarily sympathetic like human beings or something like that. Maybe that's why it's avoided, or I don't know much about them.
I think at the time, you know, it was the mandate from the studio was just like, this is what we're doing. Let's not focus on this. Let's focus on the light characters and the comedy, and that's what we're. And through that was born the stereotype. So
yeah. So I mean, yeah, I can point. I'm aware as an adult in 2023, like this is a problematic movie in some ways. But I don't know how to fix it. But I'd be open to seeing it done correctly from a Jamaican perspective.
yeah, and when we say that, we're not saying that the movie can't be a family film. Like you can still do it. Just show it. You know, show the true culture there, and I think you only get that by involving Jamaica, you know, some kind of Jamaican representative creatively in the film. That they don't have to necessarily write the script, but they've got to sit down with the writer or with the director, being like, no, this is not how it is. We don't have names like Sanka Coffee and Yul Brynner. Like these are traditional Jamaican names. Here's a handful of them. Here's, you know, the clothes that they wear, the market women, that we don't just see the stereotypical, you know, that scene. So I think that's all you would really need to do, and pay a little more attention to what do Jamaican people actually sound like, instead of the accents.
Do they when they have to look inward and get inspired, do all Jamaicans just suddenly start singing and smiling and dancing and rhyming? Like, you know,
Right.
that was how they got Jamaican, was like
Feel the rhythm, right?
feel the
Yeah.
rhythm, right? Like,
Feel the rhythm. Feel the rhyme. Get on up. It's bobsled time. Cool running.
again, a cute little shortcut for the audience, but it's like that could actually be genuine in some ways, but it too much paints them into a corner as a cartoon.
So let me ask, do you think audiences of today would enjoy this movie?
Like if you made people watch it, I think people would have an okay time with it, but I don't know. I don't think I don't know.
I mean, I think kids would still like it. You know, I mean, it just depends on what lessons you're trying to teach your kids, I guess.
Yeah, I think, yeah, same thing. I think younger crowd probably still like it. I think anyone over a teenager would probably see the flaws, and I think audiences are much more accepting of what's culturally appropriate and what isn't. So, and it's also it's a very easy movie, like many Disney films are. It's very straightforward and not emotionally complicated. So, I think, yeah, kids would probably be okay, would feel okay about it, but anyone over a teenager would kind of see through it.
Yeah, Gen Z wouldn't like this movie.
Right.
Did you guys see pop culturally, just Gen Z, they figured out a way to get at us now? Because now when they say like if something happened in the 90s or was written, or the 80s or 90s, they start saying the late 1900s. I keep seeing it pop up more and more online. It's just like kids, like students asking their teachers, like, I read this thing from the late 1990s, and it would be something from like 98. And I'm like,
oh my God.
Ooh, that is, I didn't anticipate that. I mean, that is just brilliant, destructive language. I love it. Like, ouch.
Oh, that hurts. That's a low blow.
So yeah, that's so expect to hear that when that it's going to be just a cut at you for being super old.
Right.
It's like boomer. The phrase boomer.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
It's our boomer.
that's true. All right, should we take a look at how Cool Runnings fared at the box office with a little box office glory?
Sure.
Run the receipts.
Cool Runnings was shot in February and March 1993 in both Jamaica and Calgary, so the real actual locations. It had a $17 million budget. It opened up October 1st, 1993 at number 3.
Hey.
Number 3 was opening up against Malice for Love or Money and A Bronx Tale.
Jeez.
Interesting October films.
Yeah.
And it landed right between The Good Son and The Program. So Good Son at number 2, I think in maybe its second week, and The Program at number 4. Opening week, it brought in $7 million. It had a total of $68.8 million domestic run, another $86 million internationally, for a total of $155 million. So that's a pretty big hit.
Yeah, that's good money.
Yeah, it's a massive hit, I would say,
Yeah.
on a $17 million budget. Good
Yeah.
job.
And John Candy, pushed hard for this movie. He pushed hard for the role, but always, a lot of the cast talked about how much he believed in it and was really like pushing this story. It seems like he knew it was going to work if it came together, at least at the time. Who knows how he'd feel about it now, but yeah, it was ended up being his last. It's the final film that was released while he was alive and his last real hit. It ended up at number 16 of 1993, right between Grumpy Old Men and Dave. So Mr. Candy could not take down Mr.'s Lemon and Mathau.
But he came close.
That's a hard duo to take down.
It is, yeah. Comedy legends. Again, Grumpy Old Men. Check it out in the archives at ReconCinemation.com. We have not covered Dave yet, though. Top at the box office in 93, Jurassic Park, Mrs. Doubtfire, and The Fugitive.
Ooh.
I haven't heard of those.
Yeah, never. The Fugitive would be kind of fun to cover. Let's add that to the list.
Man, I remember the hype around that movie. It was crazy.
It's a huge movie that nobody talks about anymore.
Nobody, even though there were sequels, at least one sequel.
There's one sequel. There was a show that came out in the 2000s, but not a film that people are talking about for how big it was.
It was the movie everybody got when they purchased their first DVD player. Either that or Sphere or
that handful of Warner Brothers movies.
Lethal
Batman,
Weapon
Color
4.
Purple. Yeah. Raging Bull. Yeah. Those are the days. But and on top of its really massively successful theatrical run, it got even more popular on video and on cable. I remember it ran on the Disney Channel like all the time. So this was a movie that was everywhere, and that was also part of probably why I didn't want to watch it. That like the more a movie got shoved down my throat that really wasn't in my like Jurassic Park, I was fine with. Batman, fine with. But a movie like this, it was just not like a family film.
You were too cool.
No.
You were too cool for the Cool Runnings.
Too cool.
Apparently, yeah. So I mean, it had legs there. I think over time, it's a movie that's kind of disappeared. It is interesting that for all these things that Disney brings back and makes new sequels of or turns into a series, that there never was a Cool Runnings 2 or a cool any kind of other version or remake of it.
Yeah,
we talked about in our Cutting Edge podcast that there were 3 sequels to that movie, but nothing for Cool Runnings.
Is that a respect to John Candy?
Maybe.
Yeah,
I don't know. But could you have a version where like Dougie Doug was the coach? A 20 years later, or I don't know, maybe, but
Maybe.
I could be
Probably
down.
not.
yeah, maybe for all the reasons we listed here, it's why they kind of stayed away from this one.
Yeah, may as well just leave it alone.
Yeah. All right, Brent, I think it's time we come back to our 6 degrees of ReconCinemation. David, you wanted us to connect Cool Runnings to Robin Hood Men in Tights.
Yeah, what do you got?
I gotta go first. Because John will say it, and then everybody will be like, "Oh, Brent's just copying John because he's whatever." So I'm going first, John. Sorry, I figured this out all on my own. After quickly looking at the cast of Robin Hood Men in Tights, it was very easy to figure out that both John Candy and Richard Lewis were in Wagons East together, and there you go.
Boom! I forgot about that. Dang. Okay. I knew it was a big cast, so I was like, well, there's enough entry points, but I was like, I don't think anyone was in a movie with him. Fool. Yeah. I'm a fool.
That's great, Brent. I did not pick that route, but I have another one move connection.
Nice.
John Candy co-starred with and was directed by Mel Brooks in Spaceballs.
Oh, right. I forgot. And then I forgot we're doing. Yeah. Well, Mel Brooks shows up in all his own movies too. So.
He does. Yeah.
So it doesn't matter. All right. Fair enough.
Boom.
Got you
an
easy
ways
one.
to go. All right. Well, I think that's Cool Runnings. We said what we feel about it. It doesn't always feel good to kind of like chop down a movie, especially a family movie like this. That there are a lot of people who still do love this movie. I mean, if anyone listens to Unspooled with Paul Scheer, they covered Cool Runnings and love the movie. Absolutely love it. It's interesting on that show what movies they tear down for what reasons, and some they just totally look past it. So barely even mention the cultural appropriation, but that's an angle that we felt like we couldn't avoid.
Yeah, we're too attuned to these kinds of things, Yeah. So, but like, did you not have a good time watching it though? I mean, it was still an okay time, right? Like, you had fun. I had fun. I liked it.
When you put that stuff aside, you can have a good time with it, but it's really hard to. It was hard for me too. It's hard for me to look past it.
No, 100%. Yeah, I get it.
Well, we've got an exciting lineup this March. We've got a certain someone whom we may have mentioned on this episode. Their birthday's coming up, so we always come back to cover one of their films. Plus, baseball season's right around the corner. Believe it or not, it's almost here. So we've got a special film that we're going to look at that I've been wanting to do for a long time. So stay tuned for an exciting month of March. Anything else, guys? Anything you want to wrap up with?
I'm good.
All right. Well, check out our archives at ReconCinemation.com. Hit us up on social media. We're at ReconCinemation Podcast. And while you're at it, give us a rating and a review. It always helps the show, and we appreciate it. So thank you to our friends, E.K. Wimmer for the theme music, Curtis Moore for the poster, like usual. And with that, we will see you next time on ReconCinemation.
Take care.
Cowabunga.
It's the odds. If you've got a problem, you got to rise above it. When you face a challenge, you've got to rise above it. Face your challenge. When the sea is rough and high, all the well is running dry. Just rise above it. Come on and rise above it.
Some people say, them can't believe. Jamaica, we have a bobsled team. We have the Wanderers.
I know one junior.
You, Sanka.
The fastest of Jamaican sprinters.